Welcome to the Why in Poetry, a series of conversations with poets, their nuances, their thoughts, and of course, poetry. And I hope you enjoy all of these conversations as much as I did.
And so, welcome, Rasha. We're just meeting for the first time today, so tell me all of the things, and I'll share some of the things about me, or if you have any specific questions, we could do that too. And let's do it.
Awesome. I'll go with a short intro first, and then we can unpack from there as we decide what feels useful or interesting for us. Hi, my name is Rasha Abdul Hadi. I am a queer, genderqueer Palestinian Southerner who grew up in a small, medium-sized town in southern Georgia. But my first memories are of Damascus, so there's there are multiple places that I'm from. I am disabled by long COVID and have been organizing throughout the pandemic and continue to organize for COVID safety and disability justice and accessibility practices within the communities that I organize in. I've organized in Chicago and in Atlanta, and to some degree in DC. And I am a poet as well as a speculative fiction writer and editor. I am also a fiber artist who practices traditional Palestinian embroidery called tatriz.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I love all of these things. Yes. So welcome, Rasha. I mean, what a intro, as many as it was. And I was looking, I'm like, is that a kefie? Kufie? What is the best way to pronounce that?
Kufiyeh.
Kufie?
Yeah. And yes, this is a kufiyeh. This is a Herbawi kufiyeh from
Okay.
the kufiyeh factory in Palestine. It is a black because people will be listening on audio, this is a black and rainbow colored kufiyeh, which I began wearing after the Pulse massacre in Orlando. I have a black and white one that I have inherited from family, but this is the one that I usually wear.
A little bit about me. So I am an Afro-Caribbean poet, and I am very much in the speculative, Afrofuturistic fantasy spectrum. So I got really excited when you said that. Um, and I specifically focus on like Black and Caribbean liberation, but Black and brown folks all over. But I just through the lens that I'm in. So, love to use mythology with my work. And I teach, I do podcasts, which is what we're gonna do in this moment. And I'm just here for the reimagining of what the future can look like, is my little gist of it all. But I'm also like the neighborhood crystal lady, the little witch of the family, all of that stuff. So, um, there's a little
Little
bit
Witch of the Family sounds like a great title for a children's book.
that
Like if I'm
I
just
already
gonna
got a
reflect that
notebook
back.
there. So I'm like,
And speaking geologically, you reminded me to go get two things that I often keep with me when I am speaking publicly or on podcasts
mhm,
or reading at events,
mhm,
doing interviews these days. And one is a stone
mhm,
from the Dead Sea.
mhm,
And I went there, it's about 11. And that is the closest I have ever been to Palestine, to
mm,
be able to stand on the shore uh, in Jordan
mm,
and see the other side and not be able to go. And the other is a coin I don't know if the light will catch it in the right way that you'll be able to quite see it, but this is a coin from Palestine that was given to me by another poet, Lisa Soher Madaj, and it was minted in 1942, which makes it both older than the apartheid settler state and older than my father, who was forced into exile along with his family as a child, as part of the 1948 forced displacement called the Nakba. But these two things I often keep with me. I find that holding them feels very grounding. Can remind me to stay in my body, in my living Palestinian body, as you know, so many things can become very abstracted or intellectualized. And these both feel like good company and reminders, but also very physically remind me to come back. So thank you for mentioning the crystals. These were good reminders. You reminded me to go get those.
And thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. So where do we move from here? Or stay within, right? Where do we expand from here?
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about, like, you know, I got excited about this invitation as I was telling you as we were just getting set up.
Yeah.
You know, we don't really know each other, but we know some poets who know each other. And I really just appreciated your energy of not necessarily having a job or a grant or anything that required you to do these conversations, but that you were just like, I want to do this, so I'm just going to do it. So who wants to do it with me? And I was like, this energy, I don't know this person, but this energy is what I like. So, yeah, I mean, I could read a couple of poems, but I'd also love to hear, or you could read some poetry. We could do a little like riff back and forth. But I also just love to hear, like, yeah, what is the longing that's been in you that really, like, oh, and this bubbled up and you're like, I'm gonna say yes to this bubbling up. I'm gonna grab something, but I'm listening.
Yeah, that's such a good question. Overall, I just realized I don't hear enough conversations of poets. I think a lot about how we have writer elders that have sit in their living rooms and they've had discussions, and from those discussions, we have ways to work towards liberation, to imagine a different life, but also to remember the humanity within us. And even if it is that we're simply sharing poems and just random thoughts, I think we're missing the like having these living rooms filled with artists and talking about all the things, right? Talking about art, talking about liberation, politics, possibility. And the best places that I've ever been have been with poets. The best rooms that I've been in energetically have been with poets. So it's like, how do we create this in a way that more people can be a part of and not necessarily having to be in somebody's living room, but you know, we reach across time and space.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many thoughts and feelings that spark in me as I listen to you talk about that, like longing and desire and the invitation of that desire toward connection and practicing together. That last piece you said, I'll start with first, because when you talked about like being in each other's living rooms, one of the things that, so as a disabled person, disabled by long COVID, who isn't able, I'm not able to do the 80-hour work weeks and like biking between multiple meetings and locations and events. I'm not able to do as much of the upright time. And so doing online connections with people, texting, calling, social media, virtual spaces have become much more important to me as the ways that I both connect to people that I care about and want to collaborate with, but also as a channel through which I can offer something. And something that I really something that feels really sweet to me that I remember from the first year of the pandemic that is still ongoing. Let us be clear.
Please.
Is the experience of going to all of these like pop-up readings hosted by so many amazing poets, featuring so many amazing poets. I need to say Ariel Marie's name because I always need to say their name, but just to give credit to them and lots of other poets who organize spaces, partly to get artists paid after so many gigs had been canceled, but also as just a way to break isolation and be together and to turn towards each other rather than the endless binging of content on streaming platforms that are exploitative of so many people. But the sweetness that I remember is watching these amazing, powerful, sometimes fancy, I think of them as fancy and glamorous poets, just be like sitting on the floor of their living room with their couch behind them and like reading something amazing and transformative. And it felt to me so much like small town culture, like village culture, like really just being in each other's homes in a way that is not as common. And so when you said that at the end, that resonated with me. And I remembered some of those moments of being like, oh, this feels like I'm really just hanging out with you.
Yeah.
And when I hear folks be so like dismissive of online and virtual methods of gathering, there are definitely bad ways to do that, as there are, or like, you know, ways that can be exhausting or feel not connected as much online as they can be in person.
Absolutely.
There are some very alienating in-person events I've been to as well, even before the pandemic. But yeah, so that idea of being in this kind of like intimate space, but still also a space of craft and practice is really resonates with me. That was one thing that sparked.
Yes. So that is my biggest intention in removing a little bit of the formalities of certain spaces as well. I literally just, I want to hang out with poets. Like that's literally the thing. I learn more than whatever I ask. I'm just like, wow, let me just write down all of these notes because there's always something that I'm learning. So it's pleasurable to me.
The other thing, and I won't go on as long about it, that sparked from what you were saying is I'm really interested in how the way that we make culture and art is a form in itself, is as much a part of the craft of the art as whatever the finished product contains, right? So like the process for how to get there is an art making, is an artistic process, is a cultural process. I use the term cultural organizer, which I learned from a mentor of mine, Tafara Waller Muhammad. And that I think about that orientation both when I'm doing writing and literary work, but also fiber arts work. So the traditional Palestinian embroidery, I think practice has really clarified this for me, which is an instinct I always had, right? To like want to be with other people and collaborate, whether it's theater making or puppet making or improv or like generating performances or other artistic work together or doing community organizing. The process of making this embroidery is not something that somebody does alone by themselves in their house. I mean, maybe sometimes yes, and maybe now more so, or at least in times of disrupted Palestinian culture. But the tradition is a circle. The tradition is to be in context with family, with neighbors, with friends, with extended family, and to be making the clothing or the household items that you'll use for your adult life, and or that you might give to friends or family. And you learn from a very young age and begin doing it. It's not like something you have to go to school
Right.
for,
Yeah.
right? It's not something you need a degree to do. It's totally natural for kids to be doing it. Totally normal for people to do it their whole lives. And totally normal to do it with other people and to, yeah, participate in doing pieces together because they might be too big to do alone. And I think about that as I think about models of community organizing and artistic production too, because even with the embroidery work I do, I don't want to just be some gallery oriented
Yes.
artist who's going to violently nail my pieces to a wall. When they're pieces that are meant to be worn, they're meant to clothe humans. And I think about that with poetry too, as something that has to be, remade like a meal. Maybe there are favorite recipes and you share recipes and swap them and do your own versions of them. And you bring back some of the good old recipes, those are ones that you make again and again. But it's not like you could just cook one meal and that's all the meal that you'd ever need for the rest of your life. You've got to keep making food to eat.
Yeah.
And that's how I think about doing art. So that was the other part from what you said that really resonated with me, the idea of being together.
And you also reminded me that the other part to this desire is sometimes, just like you said, it's the process of making that I'm interested about. Because we get the final product, and I had something that was published, and I'm like, how I started this poem is not what this finished product that is published. The original unedited version has a whole different intention and meaning than what the published poem is, right? And it's take it as you wish because it's now published and it's available for you to feel however you wish to feel about it, but just know that the initial seed of this poem is completely different from what you're experiencing on this page.
I think about that a lot. I don't know if it sounds like maybe you do this, and I'm curious to hear you talk about it if you do. But I think of some of my poems in the same way that singers or songwriters or musicians might perform a piece of music. Where you might perform part of it, you might perform the extended version or the radio edit, or you might do you might do an acoustic version, you might do an electric version, you might do a dance club version of what the piece is. You might do an updated version. I think about songs like Candle in the Wind or We Didn't Start the Fire, which are such pop confections, but different topical revisions of forms that then get updated, and it's still the same but it's different. And yeah, I think it also helps me as a poet not to be too precious about what a final edited version is, something that gets published, because for me it's not, no poem is ever 100% finished. It's just sort of temporarily set aside. It's this is enough for now. It's landed, and but it could always be revisited. We could do a cover. Do you ever feel that way about poems where they have multiple?
I think I've thought about it, but not with the kind of the comparison of music, but that's just such a good way to be okay with things to be different, right? Because sometimes I am very no, this is not what I meant kind of thing. But it does make sense that, every place that these poems live, it has its own space. It has its own arrangement, its own furniture, all of that stuff. And so, each version is in its own way the right version for wherever it is.
I'm enjoying getting to talk about craft and I know this is not a new thing, as an observation, sometimes a complaint, but the degree to which racialized, colonized people whose disabled, gendered, queered identities also become subject to structural violence, to historical erasure, to erasure in the present, to domination, to abandonment. How we are often incentivized,
yes,
and we get more attention on the menu of empire when we're being served as a delicious daily special.
I just love how strange words, I just have to say. Continue.
On empire's menu.
Mm-hmm.
We are often praised for being delicious when we describe our injuries, our trauma, when we reflect back to power, how power has hurt us, because it's power likes for us to talk about power, and to reflect back to power that it is powerful. And we are less often asked about how we think about our craft and how we write our work when we write for each other, when we write for our people, our peoples. Many of us have multiple peoples.
Yes.
And like what the difference is between reflecting settler, apartheid, colonial power back to itself, what it means to speak to our own folks in a way that that might be life producing, might be critical, might be intimate, might be speculative. Yeah. But so I also am just appreciating that opportunity in this moment. Absolutely. As well.
It's something I have to like sink into, because there is a difference. And sometimes while we send out our submissions and then we answer these calls, I hope that we don't lose that difference along the way.
Yeah.
Especially during editing processes.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel very open to editing, and I think I'm old enough and chewy enough and salty enough that I'm pretty clear about which things are intentional. And that like, no, that's that way for a reason.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not the way someone else would do it. Maybe not everyone will get why I'm doing it that way, but it's there. Someone who wants to be curious about it can find it if they want to. Or it's just there for me. But yeah, and versus like other things, amazing editors can sometimes really help snap a piece into place or clarify like which part is communication versus just, journal writing. Like which kinds of things are like helpful reflections that maybe you needed to know as a writer in order to write the piece, but may not be the thing that you need to offer to other people publicly, in terms of like what actually communicates your idea or the emotion or the image or the insight. Aria Aripe Nidizak, it was recently published in Poetry Ireland. Maybe this is a good way to transition to reading you a poem.
You read my mind.
Let me look at my most recent file of it, but make sure that this is the right, let me get the right version. Poetry Ireland published a poem of mine at the end of the year in December.
Mm-hmm.
And the editor that I worked with there, who's a guest editor, Arya Urupe, also known as Nindi Zak, gave me great edits on this piece that I sent out that felt clear to me that it would be a good match. I really wanted Poetry Ireland to publish it because it speaks about Ireland and connections between Ireland and Palestine. Yeah, and some edits that I received really helped. I was like, oh no, you get what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah.
And you're helping me really sharpen it, really aim it well. And that felt like such a gift of editing. And it's such a trust to be able to develop with editors, which is also why when people like the editor-in-chief of Guernica publish terribly written, unexamined settler genocide apologia, it breaks the trust of being able to work with editors and being able to work with publications, because then you can never know. You will always wonder whether the suggestions they make are in service of clarifying and enhancing the goals that you have with your work, or the best, like the most full version that your work could be for itself, versus trying to soften it to satisfy settler discomfort. I'll leave you. So I have a question for you in case this might be fun for you to talk about after I read this poem or at some point. I would love to know if there's a craft question or a craft topic that you really wish people would ask you about, or that you could get to talk about more often, or that you'd love to talk about more with other poets. So just feel free to marinate on that.
Yeah, I will.
And you don't have to answer it right away, but I would love to know at any point what you think about that. And if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. So I'm going to read to you They Talk to Me About Palestine, which was published in Poetry Ireland in December. They ask me if I've been, but nearly everyone I know who's tried couldn't get in. They ask me if I've been, when they want to talk about when they went and what it meant to them. And they don't want to hear that I can't pass the border 3 times over, don't have the right passports, though I do have the impropriety to act as the eldest son of the second eldest son, acting as the eldest remittance of a family in exile, and have the temerity to lay down salty lines like these for protection. They ask me if I know him, when they want to say they know from Palestine. I don't know all the Palestinians. They insist I should. I am told he was a reporter during the Intifada. I assure them I'll be glad to meet him if he comes to a reading. I don't say it's the Intifada, not the Infratada. And there have now been 3, so do specify, please, or perhaps take a breath and ask why you long to prove on me, as if you couldn't hear Palestine and be, just for a moment, inconsolably quiet. They ask me if I have been, as if no one knows. There's no right of return, no right to visit. And if you don't know this, you don't know the first aleph of the alphabet in the language of Palestine. They tell me, don't give up. Say South Africa, say boycott. Do not say miners shot by their own government, or say, like Ireland, a partition will work. They do not say the Troubles, or remember Pakistan at all. Some will ask for my advice before they go trip on a birthright, or a fellowship that promises to tell both sides, or to pack a friend's place in Tel Aviv on half of Yafa's grave. Look, to get to where you've been and want to be, I would have to time travel through a nation and find another guide, since my father is dead and refused to go when he was alive. I must first mourn him, forgive him, and pass at last through the door of his death. And to recover from that crossing, I must spend time among the endangered ones and all our dead. And before any of this, I must unhook my mother from my life so she can breathe on her own. And when I get across, in the end, I'll bend my ribs like a bridge to answer where I'll go. And when I do, they really better have stopped trying to talk to me about Palestine. There we go.
It's so good. And I think the interesting thing about, I think, all of us who are victim doesn't feel strong enough a word, but that's what I'll use. Against colonialism, against apartheid, the children of those who made it out or haven't, we have very similar experiences. And I think that's what a lot of the folks who haven't experienced this, either, face to face or through generational inheritance, can't quite understand solidarity. Because as you say that, I think about my own father who went back to Haiti probably 15 years after the Duvalier regime because he couldn't go. And so many white people literally have been like, oh, I've been there on a mission trip. And I'm just like, right. And so I appreciate and I'm grateful for this piece.
Thank you. I'm glad for it to offer you companionship, some company.
Yeah.
I have some dear loved ones with family in Haiti. And one of the closest friends of my heart, someone I organized with in Atlanta, we did whole scheming about like a popular education course we were going to do together, connecting Haiti and Palestine, and both the parallels and how we can think them together, understand them together, struggle them together, but also like the material, structural, political, geopolitical, like centrality, right? Marginalization and centrality of both in this moment. A lot of the same proper nouns are involved, both in nation states, settler imperial nation states, European imperial nation states, and corporate interests, particular wealthy billionaires. There's a lot.
There is a lot. A lot of mayors. They like to do the same things everywhere. So,
Yeah. My heart feels such deep kinship and care for Black folks, for Native folks, for colonized folks, who live such connected stories to each other and to Palestine. And I feel such a responsibility that I do try to be clear, both when I organize with Palestinians who may not have encountered other settler colonies beyond the one occupying Palestine. Because those other settler colonies like to represent themselves as a beacon of hope and possibility. And or justice, allegedly. Yeah, I feel very clear that Palestine is not an exception.
Yeah.
And so many, yeah, there's so many hinges, so many pivot points within empire. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for letting me know a little bit about you and your lineage and the resonances.
Yeah. There's a lot there.
We live empire very intimately.
Very
We
intimate.
live it as like family relationships. It
Yes.
affects, yeah, plans.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just jargon, as one
No,
Kirkus claimed online when talking about settler colonialism.
I think that is my question when you asked me about craft. Sometimes my brain doesn't fully always understand like terminology, but what I think about when it comes to writing poetry and in general, right, is intentionality is what I wish people would ask more about. That's what I also like to teach when I'm talking about world building, regardless of what the room looks like. I do teach online with Grub Street, and so sometimes I get a very mixed crowd of different people across the world, which is really, really neat. And sometimes it's the majority people from Boston. And so it can be very Bostonian, let's say. And I intentionally try to say, what is the purpose of your world building? And then with learning intention is where we start learning who this person that is writing is and why they're writing. And I think that is something that um, I'd like to discuss more with my writing, you know? Because sometimes my things get pretty out there or it's very subtle and easy to miss, to say. And so, just like I like the backstories of the work. I want the zodiac sign of whatever the character is, the speaker. If you have a speaker, is the speaker actually the speaker or is it also the writer? You know, I've never separated the two. And so I find that also really interesting of like, what does that even mean? So.
Look, yeah, if you're writing a persona poem, you still wrote it, you're still speaking.
Yes.
Whatever you're talking about, you're still the one speaking. Maybe not everything you're speaking about happened to you. Maybe you have a particular slant on the way that you're talking about the thing, but it's all your words. You put them on the page.
Yeah. And the assumption that it can be that there's this speaker, I think of as like there's this hologram of another version of whatever this thing is becoming, sometimes reflects how non-communal the thinking is around writing poetry.
Can you say more about that?
So how I started with words was through oration. That's how my dad told all of the stories while we were driving home from school. And so my speaker is my writer, is the teacher, is the reader. Like that is all of it. It's all encompassing. And any story that I had encountered was usually out loud. And when it's out loud, it's not just to one person, it's whoever is in earshot. And so even if I am by myself in a room, it's many people that are in the earshot, right? Like if I think about just the spiritual nature of writing, where sometimes I'm neither the speaker nor the writer. I am just receiving the download of whatever I'm supposed to be writing. Then you're not just this in a vacuum creator. And so I have these conversations a lot with my poetry group and one friend in particular of like, it's hard to think about just like these specific details of like, who is your audience? And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm writing for like whoever is willing to listen versus a 35-year-old Afro-Caribbean group of people. I'm just like, I think sometimes the academic visualization of what poetry is can be very isolating.
Mm.
And so it's like when I think of a speaker, I think of somebody sitting or standing in a room of silence versus like the call and response that I'm assuming when I'm creating something.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like I hear there's a lot of rich, like embodied imagery that is present for me as I was listening to you of these spaces and relationships, right? Like that storytelling, that poetry, that art, that expression, that speech, language are relational.
Mm-hmm.
They're about communicating outside of whatever the experience is of the person communicating, the interior made exterior and offered in some way. That, but that I also feel like I'm feeling aware of like the abdication of responsibility that can come when, so that's part of what I hear when you were talking about this communal aspect, right? So if folks are rewarded or expected to produce in private, to not accept any responsibility for, or not even responsibility, but intention, going back to that other word you shared, the intent of what is communicated as well as how it's received, knowing that we don't have full control over it, but we can still have agency. And that abdication of agency, that abdication of responsibility, feels very anti-communal, very anti-relational. It refuses that connection or mutual responsibility or care. And I think I do encounter this as a frustrating point of craft with artists in any medium, whether it's poetry or something else, who are like, well, I just made it. I don't really know what it means. And I don't know, it doesn't really mean anything. I don't really care what people get from it or not. I don't take any if people interpret it that way, that's not what I meant. And I think that there could be some very interesting conversations about, and as an artist, I often experience like delight and curiosity or humor in the different ways my work is received versus like what I thought I was communicating very literally versus people being like, oh, this is a vast metaphor. And I'm like, no, this is literally what happened. This is just, I didn't make it up. I'm practically just taking notes from real events. Maybe the language sounds fancy, but it's just literally what happened. Or, people, being like, I don't know, does it mean this? And I'm like, it 100% means that. That's exactly what I said. So I think that there are interesting possibilities for that conversation between what artists intend or express and what people who engage with it are present for that receive, understand, or where that leads them to. That's fascinating to me. But that's embracing that connection. And I part of what I respond to about what you're saying is this, I'm less interested in art that abdicates that responsibility or refuses to have any kind of relationship. I'm like, then why did you make it and put it in the world? Why is it not just in your journal? Why didn't you just keep it at home with you if you didn't have anything you were trying to give to someone else?
Yeah.
Calorie free is how I think of some of this art. Just this like hollow, calorie free. You made it because it's a widget. The other thing that came up, I'll be honest. I'll be honest that I think I'm curious when you work with students and you begin with artistic intent or world building intent. I'm curious how people respond to that, because my experience is that those can be very scary questions for people to engage with, because it gets at some deep existential stuff. Yes. Like, why are we here? What is my life for? Why do I do what I do? Does what I do have any meaning? What is my relationship to other people? Do I like other people? Do other people like me? What does it mean if they do or if I don't? And those could be very uncomfortable for anyone to answer. And my experience is that some folks who abdicate that relational responsibility are using art as a bypass in the same way that people might use spiritual bypass or like, any other like political doctrine that helps them to avoid some of the central mysteries of their life.
I think it's interesting because before I even start the class, which sometimes I have like repeat students who are like, you didn't do the like beginning of the class, letting everyone know what the environment's gonna be like, where I'm just like, this is a safe environment, this is the vibes of this class, like what we're not gonna do is this. I think I set the tone early on that people are gonna lean into discomfort here. And so, for some people who may have like a life crisis, they're probably not the ones who share. Or by the end, they're like, wow, I haven't thought about these things before, or I have never been asked these questions before. And so I'm still like ruminating on this, but this is what I got. Right. And so, I think overall, when the class ends, people are like, I'm gonna do this differently, right? Every class, I'm reading Black and Brown folks. I'm like, here are some experiences of these worlds if you're wanting to expand. And what I realize as well is that, especially adults, the younger ones are all right. They're all right. Like, they're the ones who are out here doing these like huge revolutionary connected to their emotions type of work. But the adults are the ones that are like, I don't know how to get out of this box that I have been placed in. And I'm the reminder of like, what box? And so, sometimes there are people who want to bypass, but I don't know if they can keep bypassing once they leave my room. Because I don't leave space for it.
I love that energy. That's what a scary and precious gift to give to the students in your class, to the artists and writers who come to spend time with you. This pleases me so much. I'm really enjoying getting to know you and your approach to craft and poetry. I think what you're describing too feels so. Some folks might not think of what you're describing as doing community organizing or doing popular education or even doing political action. but I think it is. I want to offer you credit for the depth and just the urgency of holding insistent space, like invitation, but insistence, like spacious, but focused, to call people into their own agency, their own power, their own responsibility, their own specificity. Because I'll be honest with you that as an organizer, and especially in this escalated time of annihilatory violence against every aspect of Palestinian life and anyone who would advocate either along with Palestinians or for their own people in the same way against annihilatory violence. It's very clarifying to watch very good people, very nice people who mean well, allegedly have good politics, care about humanity, care about life, lack any sense of their own power, lack any sense of taking meaningful action in their own lives. I think I just see so many people who are program managers at literary institutions, executive directors of literary institutions, boards who manage $300 million plus endowments of major poetry institutions, who abdicate responsibility, who abdicate or renounce their own agency and say, oh, we don't have anything helpful to contribute in this time. And it is, to me, cowardly. And I really admire the work that you are demanding and inviting artists to do. It is brave work, and not in the showy sense, but in the sense of really confronting your own life and what it means to really be alive. And to take your life seriously.
Yeah.
To take the consequences of your life seriously, to take your own heart and your own desires and your own, the best of your longings, the most truthful parts of your heartache, and to believe that it's worth taking a risk to do something that could change reality or shape reality. And it is so tragic to watch people believe that some people move through life as if everything is Nerf and everything is like spongy and nothing has hard edges and nothing that they do could change the world, and yet still claim that poetry matters. And I think those folks should take your class.
Oh, I'm more than willing to have them come up in the room.
You should take your class. Sorry, I just had an image of some very particular groups of people and institutions.
I've had to ask these questions for myself.
Yeah.
Like, each time there is an escalation of annihilation towards people that may or may not look for me, I'm like, what is my work doing for this? Right? As much as I'd like to cover the world in a blanket and just reset this shit in a different way, I cannot do that. So what I personally think good at is writing. This is why I'm like so into speculative and Afrofuturism. Because I can think of utopias. Because I can create things that I'm like, what if? And so especially while we were closed up from the world in the pandemic, that still, I wish people realize that it's worse now. There was this writing festival of like, it was like a month filled of like different workshops and events. It was something really crazy that I'm like, I'm gonna try to go to as many as I can. And I say this every time I speak to somebody. Sonia Renee Taylor said that our writing are spells, and went into a poem, broke down the poem. We had this whole craft session. And literally, I started thinking, I'm like, if I read the elders that we talk about all of the time, the world that they were hoping was possible is somewhat here. So like, how do we keep this going? You know, I don't have the privilege to be frou-frou with my words. I just can't. You know, like there are days for beautiful poems that are creating imagery and they hold you in one way or another. But there are days where there is either, I don't know if it's a whole poem or just like a stanza of it, of like, in order to talk about the birds, then I know I'm butchering it, but like it has to be quiet, right? There has to be no bombs, there has to be no war for me to be able to enjoy writing about a beautiful day. And so the days of just writing about beautiful days, they can be here, but we need more things.
Yeah. I know we're coming close to the end of our hour.
Yeah,
I look forward to having more conversations with you.
absolutely.
I do want to offer both to you and to anyone who listens to this that my experience as a Palestinian writer, as a writer from the southeast part of this settler colony and this continent, is that words matter. The stories that we tell about reality, what has happened, what is happening, what could happen, matter. If it didn't matter, the powerful would not try so hard to marginalize, to censor us, to punish us, to deplatform us. They would not have to repeat their own propaganda so loudly and insistently if the way that we talk about reality did not matter. And so even if we are just talking about describing what is obvious to us, not even the edge of what we could imagine doing or desire, but just as a craft choice, I think about how powerful it is to just name what is obvious to us. And yeah, I think about writers like James Baldwin as one example of someone who speaks so clearly and so plainly. And the power of his writing to cut through with a kind of like, let us speak plainly.
Right.
And there are Black feminists who've done it. There are Native writers. Yeah. Hanani K. Trask is a Hawaiian writer who I think of too. And I hope that folks will read or listen to or engage with more their videos of her speaking and her insistence that we are not citizens of this murderous genocidal colony.
Nope.
At least not by our own volition. Can I offer you a speculative poem to close with?
Please.
I hadn't thought of reading it until you were just speaking the last part. I was like, oh, this might be a nice offering to come to a close with. This is one that was published also just recently in January online at West Branch. And I'll have another poem forthcoming with them later in May, but this is That Nation Talk. And some folks may have seen this online. People seem to like it when I post it. But talk abolition. Talk transformation, talk justice, talk justice, talk just us, making for each other because no one else is coming. Talk breakfast, talk Lebanon, talk coffee, talk tea. Tell me farms, tell me bees, tell me make this with me, please. Talk shelter, talk compost, talk trees, talk fruit, talk clothes, talk shoes, talk mending, talk pretending with the nieces and nephews. Talk nibblings, talk siblings, talk cousins, talk love. Kisses, kisses, kisses. We're all our friends, how we miss them. Talk dirty, talk fertile, talk little, talk turtle, mean tortoise, mean burrow, mean saving, mean refuge. Talk fleeing, talk fleeting, talk push, talk pull. Talk borderless, paperless, talk paper printed for this zine. Talk clean, talk oiled, talk scented, talk musk. Talk us, 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 just us. Still. Speak now, sing now, sleep now, sweet. Talk gun, talk melt, make smelt of defense. Talk safety, talk team, talk crew, talk streets. Talk halls and balls, crafting and brawling. Talk nurture, say accountable. Talk resource, say consequence. Talk reparations, talk return, talk land, talk deed. Stop talking now and pack all your bags, please. Just talk none of that. Make nation talk with me.
That's so good. Yeah, thank
That's
you.
my version of a joy poem.
Yes, that feels like a joy poem. There's nothing else to add.
Blessings. This has been a beautiful time. What a lovely way to meet each other.
Yes, how awesome.
May
Please
we
let people know how we can find you.
well,
I am also people.
The way to find my words, other than doing an internet search, use DuckDuckGo. Don't use Google. Use DuckDuckGo to search if you're going to use any search engine right now. At least for most folks, that's probably a better option. So feel free to look for my writings there. I don't have a website, and I probably won't ever. But I am on Twitter using my name, Rasha Abdul Hadi, all together. And yeah, I have some writing out there, but what would mean the most to me if people want to find me on the way to liberation together. Like, get in the way of genocide wherever you are. If that is getting in the way of genocide perpetrated against Palestinians, if that is getting in the way of genocide perpetrated against your own peoples or peoples close to you, all of these things matter. They are urgent. And I hope that people will say these things aloud in every room they're in, every day they're in. And if you do that, then know that you'll find me there and I'll find you there on the way to liberation. Say Palestine.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, it doesn't get better than that.
Thank you for this time. What a gift.